Now, Francesc Miralles is a very interesting man. He's a co-author of two best-selling books that many people have heard of which Ikigai may well be the best known, which has been a bestseller for many years, about the Japanese purpose of life. Any of you read Ikigai? There you are. So you have a lot of readers here. And he has come out with his co-author, Hector, with a book called, well, different titles in different countries, but in our country it's called The Four Purusharthas. In England and America it's called The Fourfold Path, and in somewhat less receptive places it's called Namaste. So three titles for one book, but the book is a book trying to do to Hinduism what Ikigai did for Japan. And I'm going to ask Francesc Miralles to start by telling you, when he wrote Ikigai, what attracted him to India and to Hinduism?
Thank you, Mr. Shashi Tharoor. It's such a honor to be here in conversation with you. Actually, the book, The Four Purusharthas, is a consequence of Ikigai. Because when we published Ikigai 8 years ago, 8 years and a half, it became very popular in many countries. But after a couple of years, it was India the place with more readers. Actually, Ikigai was #1 of the chains of bookstores during 2021 and 2022, I think. So with Hector, especially during the pandemic, we made a lot of conversations, interviews, sessions with people of India in universities, groups of women who are entrepreneurs. And many of them said, why don't you make something like Ikigai, but with India? We would love that our culture can be explained in such an easy way. And that's what we tried. And when we gave this manuscript to our publisher in the United States, John Siciliano, he said, the book is very well, but you need a real expert, a top academic that can curate the book and can write a foreword and authenticate that your work is okay. And that great man was Mr. Shashi Tharoor.
Yes, the book carries a foreword by me, but this is Francesc's book and not mine. I'm just very keen that we explore some of the important themes. Now, Ikigai is about the purpose of life, and the Purusharthas are the Hindus' purpose of life. So was there a very conscious effort on your part that you wanted to do a kind of Indian equivalent or Hindu equivalent of Ikigai?
It was after having written the first version of the manuscript. Actually, in the first draft, there wasn't references to Purusharth, but then Hector Garcia, that is the co-author of the book, and that is a very scientific mind, he said, I have been reading dozens of books of essays about spirituality, and I think there are some connections between the Purusharths and the circles of Ikigai. And in two of them, it seemed very clear. The Kama, it refers to the pleasures, to love, to the senses, and we could compare it with the first circle of Ikigai, that is what you love from life. And Arth, or Artha, it has to do with what we find to sustain ourselves, prosperity, money. And there is a circle of money also in Ikigai. So he saw that there were a lot of bridges between two systems, and in the end, it was the title of the book in India.
Wonderful. Now, the two examples you gave are interesting because in both cases, Hindu philosophy understands that these are virtues that every human being must pursue, but they can also go wrong. When karma becomes lust instead of love, it is frowned upon. When artha becomes greed instead of striving for material well-being, that is also considered wrong. Lobha is a sin for a Hindu. So the question that comes to my mind is, as you see these, did you see in Japan also an understanding that these good things in your life purpose can go too far or be too wrong?
Yes. What is interesting from Japan, it happens like India. The people who were never in India, they think of India that was narrated by Rudyard Kipling. They think that India is that, elephants, and that there is no modernity. And with Japan, we have also a stereotype idea. Some people think of Japan as a very peaceful place with a lot of Zen philosophy and harmony. And other people think of Japan like Lost in Translation, a city where the people work a lot, they don't have time for themselves, and are quite repressed. Japan is not one thing or the other, it's one thing and the other. So for a Japanese person, there is a struggle also between what he or she wishes from life and the pressure of society, of work. And for them, that duty is very important. It's very difficult to abandon the established life and be a freelancer. In Europe, and I think in India, we are more able to do that. And during the pandemic, I knew a lot of people, also in India, who had regular jobs, for instance, as a bank accountant, and they said, I don't know how long I am going to live, but the years I live, it must be my life and my purpose. And they quitted the job and they started something else. And I think we are in the era of purpose, because especially young people don't have enough with a salary, with a position. They want to be happy and they want to give some meaning to the things they do.
Some meaning to life. That's a very profound and real thing for all of us, because we want each day to have some meaning. But let me still stay with Japan for one more question. Did you see any differences, striking differences between the Japanese approach to life and the Indian or Hindu approach to life?
Actually, for the traveler, apparently there are two opposite countries. When you go to Japan, you travel in the Shinkansen, in the bullet train, and the silence is like being in church. Nobody dares to make a sound with the magazine of the paper. It's totally silent, and not even they dare to look at you directly to the eyes. They don't do it because they think this is a kind of invasion of the private space. You come to India as a traveler, you are in a bus and everybody is talking to you. It seems that it's the opposite. But there is something in common that I think that has a lot to do still with what East means, Eastern philosophy. And that is that in Japan and in India, us is more important than myself. The Western countries are very individualistic. And when you work in a company, everybody wants to have the medal, to be the one who did that. And in Japan, it's totally the opposite. There are very few famous Japanese people because there are some inventions that we don't know who was the author, because it was a team. And I think India has still this collaborative way of life. Family is important in India, friends are important in India, and if you work with other people, you give credit to these people.
Let me be devil's advocate for a minute and push back on that. Hinduism is actually an individual faith. It's an individualistic faith. The individual is supposed to find his connection to the divine. We have no collective worship, for example. We don't have your equivalent of the Sunday sermon. That individualism, where each one can even choose which particular deity to worship on which day of the week. If you want to worship Ganesh, you have one particular day. You want to worship Shiva, you have another day. So ultimately, that individualism is built into the religion. Whereas you're talking about a much more collective faith where as you say, the we is more important than the I, which was also true in Africa, but it's probably not true in India.
Maybe no more, because the progress that India has had the last 25, 30 years has Americanized a lot the mentality of many young people. They have reference that maybe for, I don't know, because I don't live here, but maybe for a young entrepreneur is more a symbol Elon Musk than somebody from India. And it's transforming the world. I don't know.
Yeah, Elon Musk has his admirers in India. I think there's no doubt about that. One more aspect that, the Japanese have this notion of accepting imperfection, right? Which is interesting, wabi-sabi.
Wabi Sabi.
And we don't really have an equivalent of that in Indian thought, unless you found something
Yes.
that you feel is comparable.
Actually, I studied German philology, but the person who is passionate for words is Hector. Hector likes very much to go to a word, look at the Sanskrit, how it's written, how was before, how is now. And he said, I have discovered a word from Hindi, or I imagine it's from Hindi, that is fascinating. Jugaad, he said.
Jugaad is Hindi.
And then he wanted to dedicate a chapter about that because he said it was a very original and necessary concept. Because, for instance, in Germany, now in Germany there is a big problem of productivity. Things are done only in one way. Then if something fails, if the right person is not here, or if the goods didn't come, you cannot do your job. But the Indian people, they have the jugaad. That would be, as we understood, the alternative way of finding a temporary solution, and maybe tomorrow we'll find the definite one. And for us, it was fascinating. It has to do with wabi-sabi. We don't want to be perfect, but we want to solve things.
That's an interesting way of correlating the two, fair enough. Let's get back to the Purusharthas. Karma, of course, you've talked about, and Artha as well. But when one looks at Dharma, the right way to be, doing the right thing, doing the thing right, all of this is wrapped up in the notion of the right conduct of Dharma. When you looked at that, did you relate Dharma to anything else in your experience,
Yes.
in your philosophy?
We related Dharma with the fourth circle of Ikigai, that is what the world needs. But in the philosophy of Kant, we find also the concept of Dharma, that man and woman must have something most important above them than their daily needs. So Dharma, as we understand it, related with Ikigai, is putting what the world needs, what the people around you needs, forward, so that your talent, what you have been gifted in this world, can go to them and benefit them. So it's a treasure of wisdom, because when you know what do you have to give to the world, and you learn how to do it, and you know what the world needs, then your Dharma would be your contribution, and every person has an individual way to play her Dharma to the others.
That's right, and that's quite right, but it's also true that my Dharma and your Dharma may not be the same thing. They may be completely unrelated. We might be both in the same place pursuing different Dharmas. Does that trouble you as a contradiction?
No, because I think we will meet in the main topics. Actually, human beings, we look very different, but we are very similar, actually. When we explore the Ikigais, for example, the purpose of every person, maybe you say, my Ikigai is communicating and writing and bringing the people this kind of wisdom, and other person will say, my Ikigai is teaching, is being a nurse, is being a doctor, is being an artist. But actually, the final purpose is always the same. It's helping humanity, making this world better, bringing beautiful things for the others.
Interesting thought. We will be opening it up to the audience in about 10-15 minutes, so do think about your questions and comments. But coming back then to Hinduism, there's some things in Hindu thought which, of course, are very foreign, to put it bluntly, to other civilizations, cultures, and religions. And one of them is the whole notion of punarjanmam, of reincarnation. That whereas, for example, in Christianity, the body has a soul. So when our body dies, the soul lives on, true, but the body is in possession of a soul. In Hinduism, essentially, the soul is in possession of a body. The soul is permanent. It exists forever until it merges into the Brahman, the universal consciousness. But the body is temporary. It can be shed like you shed an envelope in which you've contained the letter. As a result, there is this whole notion of rebirth. Because if the soul has done good deeds, it will shed this body and be born in better circumstances. If the soul has done bad deeds or is paying for previous past of earlier lives, it may be born in worse conditions. In fact, the famous Nobel Prize winning economist Amartya Sen used to joke that in Hinduism, he said, if you are a good economist in this life, you might be reborn as a physicist. But if you're a bad economist, you will be reborn as a sociologist. And that's Amartya Sen's sense of humor. But the joke is simply that it often turns out that reincarnation becomes an explanation for everything. You essentially can persuade people to accept their lot in life. You can tell them, don't blame me that I am rich and you are poor. You are paying for the sins of a past life. So you be good, conform, behave better, serve me well, be obedient, and maybe next time you will have a better life.
Yes.
Now that's no consolation because you don't remember either the misdeeds of your previous Atma or the good deeds you've done. So it's a troubling and complicated philosophy which in many ways has contributed to social conformism. And when sometimes Marxists ask why there are no revolutions in India, this could be a possible explanation if it's deeply ingrained in the psychology and the psyche of the people. Did you grapple with this idea when you were writing your book?
Yes, but my problem is that I cannot believe in afterlife. My psychology is too rational for that. I respect that other people believe in that. My mother believed. But I think that the playground of life is this. And because we cannot be sure of what comes after, for instance, the idea of karma, we can bring it to our earthly life, and then if you are in a position that you don't like, if you don't like the relationships that you have, then you can explore your words, your thoughts, your deeds, and to understand what brought you there, to understand your karma. And then you change your habits, you change your words, you change your priorities, you change your purpose, and you get another karma. So I think it's possible to believe in the law of karma without being sure that can be an afterlife. But because for my way of thinking, I think if there are so many people being born, there will be a multiplication of souls in the end. Why too many souls, and where are we going to meet each other? That would be something very, very theological.
No, but the argument in Hinduism is a bit different. Whereas the Christian philosophy is that each individual body has a soul. Hinduism argues there is a universal soul, which we share. Right, we all share it. Our bodies are what is temporary and discarded. So in fact, the logical question that, if the world's population was only 1 billion 200 years ago, it's now 7 billion today, what about all these extra souls? Christianity finds it difficult to answer that. Hinduism says it was always the same soul. So there is a difference. Anyway, let's not go there because this is a conversation we can go on dancing on the head of a pin as the Christians talk about angels. But when you look at the question of you, may I ask you a personal question? Are you yourself a believer in a particular faith?
Actually, when I am asked that, I always answer that I feel Christian and Buddhist, but in different aspects. I don't believe in Jesus as the Son of God. I believe in Jesus philosopher. I love his word. I love his idea of love. And so for me, he's a master. Maybe he's something else, but for me, he's a philosopher. And I like the idea of Christianism that you must share what you have with the other. The idea of charity that is in every religion, actually. And I like from Buddhism very much the idea of detachment. So the psychological approach of Buddha about the origin of suffering, that is to wish that things that are impermanent that should be permanent. And so I like the psychology of Buddha and I like the charity of Jesus.
That's two very interesting thoughts in one. One is on Christian ethics and Buddhism. There are lots of similarities.
Yes, in all religions is
the
idea of charity.
The spirit of charity is a very good one. But also, for example, Mahatma Gandhi would preach the philosophy of turning the other cheek. During our freedom struggle against the British, when you had the Satyagraha movement, protesting against the British. If the British came with sticks to beat our protesters, or even worse than sticks, Mahatma Gandhi's advice was straight from the Bible. It says, take the beating, accept it. And in some ways, that is an element that perhaps all three faiths have in common.
I think Mahatma Gandhi was an extremely intelligent person, and he knew that if he was using the force, he couldn't beat, in that time, the British Empire. But he did it in the ahimsa way, that is something from the giants, and it disoriented totally the colonizers, and I think it was a success in the end.
He won a moral victory when he could not win a physical victory.
Yes.
Exactly.
He showed a superiority in spirit and a higher dignity.
Absolutely. No, that's truly an interesting observation. But again, looking back at the question of Buddhist ethics, the Buddha never thought he was preaching a religion. He was preaching a code of conduct. He was preaching a way of life, right?
That's why I say that for me, Buddha is the first psychology of history. Because he didn't write a book either. What we know is what other people noted from his words, its quotations, supposedly original. But he never talked about God, afterlife. He talked about how human mind works, and how the desire works, and how the suffering is, and the attachment, and all this. So, for me, his work was understanding why we think this way, and why we suffer, and how can we escape from that.
Now, there's another good question, because every religion struggles with the question of why there is evil in the world. If Christianity envisages a benevolent, omniscient God looking down on the earth and his creations from heaven, the question comes up, why does he allow his creations to suffer so much? Buddhism was very much a response, as you rightly said, to the Buddha seeing suffering, death, illness, old age, all of these things that he witnessed and wanted a response to. Hinduism actually has a very different answer. Hinduism says that suffering is part of life. Death is part of life. Evil is the other side of good. There is absolutely no question of only there being one. Both exist. And just as you are sort of standing, if you like, on the banks of a river and trying to cross the other side, when you die, you cross perhaps somewhere else, but ultimately the journey goes on. There is no difference. That notion may have interesting ideas and problematic ideas too, but it does completely resolve the question of suffering and evil. Because if God is everywhere, God is also in your suffering. If God is with you when you are suffering, you find your ability to cope with that suffering through your relationship with the divine. You see what I'm saying? It's a complicated notion, but God is never absent. Whereas I think if you believe only in a benevolent God, you have a problem asking God, why have you forsaken me? Where are you today when I'm suffering so much? When I'm going through so much injustice? You see what I mean?
That's very interesting. And I think the question of the good and the evil, I understand it more in a Chinese way of yin and yang inside every person.
There you are.
If we examine our life, or karma, we can see very good deeds and very bad. When I am in India, I try to be kind with the people because people are very kind to me. But the other day, being in Kolkata, I was a bad person because I was very angry with a young boy that came from the publisher. He came late, we arrived late to everywhere, and in the end I shouted, "You are not professional." And I felt so bad after that. So the good and the bad are inside yourself. There are two options, and you are choosing all the time.
Very, very interesting. Tell me one more thing about your study and exploration of Hinduism. When you were looking at the four Purusharthas, you must have read a lot. Is that part of it? You dug up a lot of texts about Hinduism?
Yeah, that was more, Hector is the scientific part of our tandem. He read dozens of books. He read all your books too.
Thank you.
He was fascinated, especially in the one, Why I Am Hindu, and your history book. Hello?
I think that mic
there
is
is
going
problem
to...
maybe with the battery. And my part in writing is more the storytelling. So I take the part of the 4 attachments. And
The sound is going in and out. I think the battery is fading. Can you quickly, you take this?
So normally my role in this writing is not working. My role in this writing is trying to find an easy way to explain complicated things and to use some little stories, because we learn when we are children through the stories, and in other kind of books they are very useful too.
Yeah, we're swapping the mics for a second. So Francesc is the storyteller, the narrative. Hector's done the research. But there is one more aspect to Hinduism, which is interiority. In other words, I talked about Hindu individualism, but apart from what you can learn from reading, knowledge, jnana, and what you can do through worship or bhakti, there is the question of finding your own truth within yourself. Hinduism, for example, as in Buddhism, has a lot of space for meditation, right? And therefore you can look into the purpose of your life within yourself. Did you look into that as something that you would find interesting to explore?
I think it's not. Yes, I think this is, I relate it with the Indian wisdom. You look inside yourself and you find the solutions and the seeds of your future fruits, instead of looking outside something that makes you happy. And I think it goes well together with the process of Ikigai. When you want to discover what is your purpose in life, and there are many young people who are confused because there are so many options nowadays. When I was 15 and I finished the high school, they gave me a paper with 40 options of universities. Now there are 4,000. It has been a multiplication of opportunities and possibilities. Same happens on TV. So many young people don't know what they love, don't know what they want to do, what is their mission. And then let's go to what you were telling. You must start knowing yourself. That is something that the ancient Indian saviors knew, and also the Greek philosophers. If you know who you are, you will discover what are your talents, what are your gifts, and what is easy for you to do. And from there, you can connect with this circle of what the world needs, and you say, okay, if I am good at writing and people seems to love what I write, and the world is lacking kindness, how can I write things that promote this feeling of kindness? Then you find your purpose. So all the solutions are inside, and actually I know a couple of people, and I'm sure that everybody here too, that are always fighting with other people, with the family, with the friends, in company, with companions, with anyone. And that's because they don't want to fight with themselves. There are things that they are not accepting from themselves, things that they are not solving, and then if you stop the war into yourself, you stop the war outside also.
Fascinating, Francis. I'm going to ask one last question, and the floor is open to you, so be prepared to raise your hands. And that question is just a practical, mercenary one. How's the book doing in other countries? Has your book been received well? Is there enough curiosity about Hinduism as there was about Ikigai?
Yes, of course, the situation is different with Ikigai. When we wrote Ikigai, it was the first book about this topic. There wasn't any other in the world, and even the word Ikigai existed in Japanese, but not in the common language. So no Japanese was asking to other, what is your Ikigai? No, it was a concept that they had in philosophy, in aesthetics also, Ikigai, no? The purpose. But there are thousands and thousands of books trying to explain India. Some are more academic, some others are for children or are for different audiences. And for us, the idea we had was, let's choose 10, 12 points only, and let's try that it can be understood by anyone. So when we think of a general public, we always said, this book must be understood by the hairdresser and the taxi driver. If they understand the book, we did a good job. If you need previous information, previous readings to understand that, then this is not the book that we wanted to do.
Now, I think it's an excellent introduction for those who have not really got much knowledge of Hinduism. It's well written, very readable, easy, simple, flowing prose. It's short, so it caters to the attention span of the TikTok generation. Let me congratulate Francesc Miralles and Hector Garcia for this book and open the discussion to the audience. We just have about 18 minutes. So
Yes,
there's a hand right
thank
there.
you.
Is there a mic for the gentleman there? And I hope it's a mic that works.
And it has a wonderful foreword by Shashi Tharoor.
Ah, thank you, Francesc. Happily. There we are.
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you very much for a beautiful conversation. I have a question for Francis. Ikigai is purpose of life, right? In everything that you read, whether it's Japan or Hindu texts, is there only one purpose of life? And I would want you to take your example. I
Yes.
mean, you're a great author and a successful writer. You had previous
Yes.
likings for travel and writing. Do you think you can find another Ikigai in your lifetime?
Most people will have several ikigai through life. It's very extraordinary that you have one ikigai when you are a child and you keep it all your life. You will be very happy if you are in this situation. I always put this example. When I went to school, we were 42 students in a Catholic school. And one of the children wanted to be a priest. And it was okay. It was an idea. I said I wanted to be an astronaut, and every child had a dream. And 25 years after, I saw that child in the newspaper of Barcelona, La Vanguardia, and he was a priest. So maybe he had an only ikigai in his life, but that's not common. The common thing is that you change with life. Actually, the founder of the anthroposophy, Rudolf Steiner, said that human being changes deeply every 7 years. So it can be that you want to be a teacher, and then you go to a school, and you have 4 or 5 years that you are enjoying that, and then you feel exhausted, you feel that you have already given everything what you had. And then you want to give maybe education for the new teachers, and you have another role in life. And after that, maybe you want to write a book. So I think that the signal that our ikigai is already empty is when something that before was exciting for you now is boring. And it happened to me being teacher of German language. In the beginning, I was enthusiastic, but after repeating 20 times the same structure to the same students, I discovered that I didn't have a strong vocation. So I think nowadays I am in my 4th ikigai, that is helping the people to find their ikigai.
Wonderful. And the truth is that that everyone goes through versions of this, but it partially also depends on how you define your ikigai. People ask me, because I've done such different things as working for the UN, writing books, working in politics. But if I define my ikigai as merely being, and this is how I did from my childhood, I want to make a difference. I hope I've made a difference through all 3 purposes, all 3 things. It's in that sense a one purpose, but different manifestations of it. There's a young lady right there.
Yeah, so thank you so much for such an insightful session. I just wanted to ask Shashi Tharoor sir one question. So there are certain concepts which are very famous worldwide, like yin yang, and we have Indian version of it, be it Ardhanarishvara concept, which is very similar to yin yang. So what do you think are the concepts of Hinduism which are very underrepresented and you would want the world to know, and what are some of the misunderstood concepts in Hinduism? Because there is sometimes criticism, be it reincarnation and things like that. What do you think are some of the misunderstood concepts, and what do you think are some of the concepts which should gain recognition throughout the world? Thank you.
It's an impossible question to answer first because it's a vast question. The corpus of Hindu texts is so incredibly large that even 1,000 years ago, Adi Shankara decided to only select a few of the Upanishads, the Puranas, the Bhagavad Gita and so on, and focus all his teachings on those limited texts. And by then, that was only about 5% of the texts existing 1,000 years ago. So you have to understand that if you like, lots of things in Hinduism are unrepresented. But the beauty of Hinduism is that each Hindu can construct his or her own Hinduism. I am a Hindu who does not accept the Manusmriti, but I accept the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. That's my choice. There are obviously Hindus who go the other way. But the fact is that Hinduism allows you such an eclectic range of beliefs and practices. We have no Hindu Vatican, we have no Hindu Pope, we have no Hindu Sunday. You can worship any of the 7 days of the week, and we don't have one single deity because the fundamental Hindu concept of the Brahman is that it's unknowable. Nirguna Brahman. You don't have a shape, a form, a gender, a sound, anything. It could be a spark in the sky. So ultimately, you are free to imagine God as you wish to focus your worship. And that's why if you want to imagine God as a 10-armed woman riding a tiger, that's fine. You want to imagine God as an elephant-headed man with a pot belly writing on a tablet with a mouse by his side, that's fine too. And by the same logic in Hinduism, if you want to imagine God as a bleeding man suffering on a cross, that is also acceptable to the true Hindu. What Vivekananda taught us is that acceptance of difference is fundamental. And therefore all these differences are okay. Any point of view is okay. Ultimately, what he says he used to quote the Shiva Mahimna Stotram, which says that just as many rivers and streams flow, some straight, some winding, some downhill, some through valleys, and end up in the same sea, so also all forms of worship reach the same divine. So he said, whether you speak of Allah or Jehovah or Jesus or Shiva or Vishnu, it doesn't matter. It ultimately is different ways of aiming for the same Brahman, the same divine. That is my answer to your vast and complicated question. Yeah. Oh, sorry, someone's got the mic. You'll get it next.
Yeah, hello, sir. Sorry, I didn't want to disturb the audience, so I'll just sit down. My question is for Francis. I did read
the question
book.
should be mainly for Francesc. I'm around though. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have read the book. But when you have this discussion with people, right, so there are two kind of reviews that are the main concepts that we start discussing. One is when you talk, when the philosophers or when we speak about the philosophy and everything, there's a pyramid structure that they talk about. So for every human being, the base pyramid, it starts with the basic needs like food, clothing, etc. And always the self-development comes on the top of the pyramid. So when you spoke about the taxi drivers, the concept has to reach them. So I really love the way how religion and the purpose of life is being tagged along. Me being an atheist, it's difficult to comprehend. But the question that I have is it possible, or if you have a way on how you're planning to, or how we can make this reach the oppressed people of the community where they're still struggling? That is one question. Yes. The other one is it possible to have the purpose of life without having religion being tagged to it?
This is a very good question, and I think here we must refer to a very important psychologist of the 60s, Abraham Maslow, that he designed the pyramid
of values.
Yes, the pyramid of human needs. And that's very true what you say. When people say, what can you give, which ikigai can we give to a person that is living in the street? I say, no ikigai, because it's in the survival. This person is needing for water, for food, for a house maybe. So Abraham Maslow, he said that the human needs go higher in a pyramid. In the basic stage, you have said, is survival. If you are now a soldier in Ukraine, you don't think of ikigai. You think in saving your life and before the war ends. Second stage is security, also psychological security, and only in the higher part of the pyramid is the self-realization. So to be worried about your purpose, about the legacy you leave in the world, you have had to cover the previous stages. So what I would say, what has to do Ikigai with the people that is suffering? I would reverse this question. What can we do, the people who are in the top of the pyramid and who have the freedom to think, to help the people who is down to go higher in the pyramid? So our Ikigai can bring them in another level.
Her second question is, do you need to have a religion? Can you
No,
have
well,
an Ikigai without a religion?
Religion and God is a very open concept, I think. When we think of God, if you read the Bible literally, or the children books that were made before, you can imagine God as a man with a white bird that is over the clouds. Maybe for a child, that is God. For a Jewish, and for a Muslim, is something that you cannot imagine. It's more abstract. So what is God for you? For me, because of that, I say that I like very much the message of Jesus. God is love in any expression of it. So even if I say, I don't believe in afterlife, I cannot say that there is no afterlife because I don't know actually. But if I am taking care of other people, if I am helping my brother, if I am helping a stranger, I am doing divine things. I am communicating with reality as God would do. For me, God is that. Is the expression of something that is beyond ourselves.
Thank you, Francis. There's a young man who stood up here. Yeah, there's the mic. And then we'll go to the
young
we'll come
boy.
back next. Yeah.
So actually half of my question was answered in the last answer which you answered. So my question is, we are living in an era with hundreds of religion and thousands of philosophies to attain happiness. But as I have observed in every religion, that there is some humanistic similarities in them. Even if you look at the philosophy of Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, Christianity, there's some humanistic similarities in all of them, which is the similarity of humanistic theory introduced by Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. So do you believe, Francis sir, that all religion has this humanistic touch in their philosophies?
Yes, I think there are things in common in all the religions. For instance, the respect for the children, the respect for the old people, and the assistance to the poor. It's in every religion. What changes are more, it's a matter of concept. For instance, in Catholicism, there is a figure that there is a priest that is part of the army. For me, this is a contradiction, because Jesus said to put the other cheek, as we have said. How is possible that there is a priest going with the army in a war and that is helping one side and not the other side? So I think that the religions are born pure, but we, the human beings, then give a different, we intoxicate it with our own prejudices and our own needs that have nothing to do with that. And we can go back to Buddha. If you listen to Siddhartha Gautama, he's speaking of very simple things about the mind. But some schools of Buddhism are like Catholicism. They have so many rituals and superstitions. So the problem in any way are not the religions, but the people who practice them sometimes in a wrong way, for me.
My late boss Kofi Annan had a wonderful line. He said, the problem is never with the faith, it is with the faithful. But anyway, yeah, anyone, yeah, that's it.
Thank you for this enlightening session. So, sir, you talked about universal souls, right? So, can that be related to Carl Jung's archetypes? Are we all connected in some way? That's my question.
I think I want to quote here Ramana Maharshi. That was very important for me when I was about 20. I was reading many things of Arunachala, and it was told that Ramana Maharshi received many pilgrims from India, but also from foreign countries. He was a man with an incredible gaze of goodness. And one time, I think it was one young man came to him and said, Master Ramana, I have so many problems with the others. I am discussing all the time. I am fighting all the time. What can I do to have better relationship with the others? And he said, there are no others. And that was the simple question. So when you understand that you are almost the same and exactly the same from your needs, from any Muslim, Christian, Hindu, from somebody in Wall Street, from a peasant in China, then we understand that all of us are brothers and sisters.
Am I failing to notice somebody on this side, or there's a hand here? All right, there. And then we'll come forward, the young lady after that.
Sir, namaste to both of you.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Sir, my question is, among the four Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha, righteousness, wealth, lust or love, the concept of Moksha, how is it viewed from the angle of Ikigai? In all the other three concepts we can experience directly in our life, but the idea of moksha or the concept of moksha,
Yes.
how can we get moksha? Through death. Death is the saddest of things and the end of everything. Then how can one attain moksha through death? Or how can one experience moksha? All the other three concepts, Purusharthas, can be directly experienced in life, and how it can be experienced?
I think moksha is the most different concept of the four Purusharthas that is not directly related with Ikigai. So I think in this case, it would be more useful, the opinion of Mr. Shashi Tharoor, that how can we experience moksha? Because my knowledge of moksha is limited. I know that is liberation, that is a way of self-realization, purification. I think also beyond life, but I think he has a deeper understanding of that.
No, I think actually the reason I didn't ask that question is it would have been an impossible one to discuss. See, ultimately the notion of moksha, which is loosely and perhaps not very well translated as salvation, for the Hindu is not about the body, but about the soul. And your body is going to finish with death, but your Atman goes on. And your Atman, through the life experienced in this body, is seeking to better itself to a point where ultimately it merges into the Brahman, the universal cosmos, the universal cosmic consciousness. And that's how it attains moksha. So all of us, every one of us, is part of an indefinite process in which our Atman is using our body and our present temporal life, the life we recognize, understand, and can describe today, as a step in a journey. We have no idea where we are. It might be that we are a long way towards moksha already, and that somehow we lead such an ideal life that our Atma attains moksha. It may also be that all the stuff we're doing today, which is materially successful in today's standards, you're rich, you're prosperous, you are powerful, all of those things, may actually be earning us demerits for our Atma, and maybe next time around we'll be farther away from moksha. So it's an incredibly complicated philosophical concept. I don't consider myself equipped to find a definitive answer to it, and I think I don't blame Francesc for steering away from it either. But the short answer is, you cannot experience moksha in this life. In other words, the life that you are living is about meaning and purpose, fulfillment, goodness, all of those things of your body and your consciousness that your body has, right? It doesn't actually relate to the life of the soul. Sorry about this. I know it's not a satisfactory answer, but that's the best that I could derive, and I have read extensively on Hindu philosophy on this. The Buddha himself attained moksha, if you like, but the Buddhists call it nirvana. When he, after all those years of meditation, achieved something that was beyond this life, and that's what they call nirvana. All I can do is shrug and say, I don't know any better. Yes, there was somebody in front who had the mic. No? There was somebody who took the mic from you. Where's the young lady? Ah, yes, okay. The gentleman there? Hello, is there a mic still? I think we have one last question, and then we'll have to wrap up, I believe. Right there. Ah, that is
it's a friend of
friend
yours.
from Spain. Can you give the mic here?
It's a friend of yours.
Sorry?
It's a friend of yours.
He's a friend of mine and a friend of yours too, I hope.
Now, yes.
Who has been bringing Spain to India. So, yeah, are you going to ask? Yeah, give him the line. And bringing India to Spain, I might add.
Yeah, it's a very easy question, I hope. Why did you have to call your book, I mean, it's self-explanatory, but why did you really have to call your book Namaste with huge big letters on the cover when you published this in European languages? Was it really necessary, or did you come up with any other title? Is that the brand that you
actually, I like I was publisher before being a writer, and I like very short titles. For instance, if we examine the history of essays of self-help, we find Flow. This is from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. It's a very simple name, or Freakonomics. So I like the titles that are only one word. And from all the words I know from Sanskrit, that they are not many, Namaste, I liked it very much because it has so many translations and it's so positive. But what the American publisher said was, we cannot put Namaste in the title because on American TV, when the Simpsons want to make joke of the Indian, they put an Indian saying, Namaste, sir, and they are not going to take seriously this book. That's what he said. In Spain, in Europe, Namaste, it has not this connotation. It's something that is beautiful, and we relate it immediately with India.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, when I saw the first draft manuscript on which I was asked to comment, I too was a bit put off by the title. And I did say that in India, the title is inadequate, which is why in India they have a different title. And in America and Britain, they call it the Fourfold Path, the Four Purusharthas. So you can find different titles. But I will say one thing as a writer. Publishers always have their way on titles. So my book on British colonialism is called An Era of Darkness here, but in the rest of the world, it's called Inglorious Empire. And I think those of you who know about a movie that begins with the word inglorious will know what they were trying to evoke subliminally in the reader's mind. There you are. Thank you very much, Francesc. I'm afraid that warning light is for us. Our time is up. Thank you all very much for giving us such a wonderful hearing.
Thank you very much.
Francesc Miralles, the Four Purusharthas. Thank you.